Hello, crew. Happy Monday. As fall sports commence, I send my boy off to football and my girl off to college soccer. I just started thinking about, thankfully, all of these baseline tests that they do now for all the impact testing and concussion testing. So we have a foundation or baseline as to how they test while being healthy. This has really progressed in the last 5 years especially, but I'm sure much longer than that. But since I've been really involved in focusing more on the brain and wondering why there are so many and why they aren't caught. So I'm going to likely look down at my notes every now and then because I have numbers and I don't remember numbers and stats and all that kind of stuff. So first things first, 3.8 million concussions per year in the United States only. The majority of them are sports injuries and motor vehicle accidents, whiplash. The two most common symptoms coming from a concussion is headache and dizziness. And this stuff is so important, not just for kids, but I think the majority of even adults. Let's just say you're cleaning under your, in your kitchen, cleaning the countertops and you hit your head on the cabinets below, or something falls on your head when you're in the garage, or there are so many things, or you got in a little mini fender bender and you didn't really notice much in terms of visual disturbances or mental or sleep, but you had a headache and you kind of have dizziness here and there. But most of the time we aren't putting all these pieces together. So there's obviously two parts, the kid, the adult. Sports injuries, 50% of them actually are overuse. Their bodies are tired, their limbs give out, and that's when so many sports injuries happen, including concussions. So I was just looking at the difference in brain between a boy and a girl, the difference in the posture between a boy and a girl, strength in a neck, and how much cervical lordosis they have. So which means, I call it a C curve. I should have brought my spine back here, but the neck should go like, that is not how that should look. But if you're looking at me, the neck should be like this. Now, if you look at the typical 4-year-old, 8-year-old, 12-year-old, what position are they in? Like this. We have lost cervical lordosis, and that curve is what we call the arc of life. So that's what allows our brain to work at the most optimal. Girls typically have littler necks. Girls have more of a chance for concussions. Add that into poor posture, so a neck that goes like this as we're competing in a sport, or as we get in a car accident, or as something falls on our head, you're likely going to have more issues. Boys are going to have more behavioral challenges because they have what's called intrahemispheric or intrahemisphere. So they have more neurons, but they have less that cross hemispheres in their brain. Girls have less neurons and more that cross. So when we have a mild traumatic brain injury, which is what a concussion is, let's just say here, girls have more neurons that connect, so they don't have as long-lasting effects. Boys don't. So they're going to have more effects if they don't get the appropriate healing and treatment as soon as possible. And so there's so much talk in sports, in resting, in why it seems like there are so many more, and that's why I really wanted to come on here, is just dig into why the spine is important, why the neck is the most important, and what we can do about it. I have watched my kids play soccer for years, and every single time I see them do a header, I cringe because the majority of them aren't in the right position. If you're in the right position, you have force, you have a strong neck, you have strong base, it's a very small percentage that there's going to be overuse and recurring injuries off that. If your neck isn't locked and it's weak, your brain is going to compress on that spine, and we're going to have some sort of mild traumatic brain injury. So most people think adults take longer to heal in concussions, and I would ask that question. If you can just ask yourself, who heals faster, a kid or an adult if they have a concussion? And the answer is a kid. A kid, no. The answer is the adult heals faster, a kid heals slower. And the reason is because their brain is developing, especially the younger they are, the longer it takes for their brain to develop. They're going through all these stages of neurodevelopment. And as soon as we have an injury, it stops that neurodevelopment. So the typical recommendation is to, first of all, get to your chiropractor right away. Make sure that spine is evaluated and the brain is evaluated. Many people are working with some kind of neurologist or in the medical world doing that baseline testing. A lot of chiropractors can do that baseline testing too. But some of why kids take longer now is, besides brain development, think of our generation and further. We moved a lot more in our generation, and we didn't have the amount of technology that we do right now. The amount of streaming online is an astronomical amount. I just heard the typical middle school student is online streaming for 6 hours a day. That's in addition to school, and the average teen student is 9 hours per day. That doesn't mean they're watching YouTube all the time. I mean, that could just be Snapchat. That could be obviously YouTube and gaming and watching TV, watching movies, anything that's technology that gets their brain to have to shift differently. And then we look at posture that goes like this. Those are the main indicators for kids taking longer to heal from concussions. And so as a chiropractor, as somebody who is looking at how your brain is functioning, if your neck has lost its curve, adult or kid, if you're a parent, just take a peek at your child when they come home from, if they're in school already or at supper time. Look at them from the side and see if their ear hole lines up with their shoulder. If not, they've lost their cervical curve. And I would bet the majority of them at 5 or 6 have. They're not as active. And if you look at them from the back, you're going to notice likely some kind of head tilt. Whether you do or don't, you're going to more than likely, 90%, will notice some kind of shoulder. And it's a different eye, but paying attention to their spine and their posture is going to help you in understanding their risk for injury. I am not the person that will say your kid cannot play a sport or my kid cannot play a sport because of the risk is too high. I don't believe that the risk is too high in anything. What I do believe in is that in order for us to perform at a high level, child, adult, school, not school, work, our bodies need to work better. And we need to stay away from those things that are pulling energy from our brain, from our muscles, and putting us into a fight or flight mechanism, which is what technology essentially does. So, number one, take a peek at your kid. Take a peek at your posture. Evaluate or take a look back at if you've struggled with headaches or dizziness and you do remember getting hit in the head, or back in the day 20 years ago you had a concussion. Many of them, so many people in our generation would say, yeah, I got hit, I got my bell rung, but nobody ever took me out, and I was tougher than that. And like, the symptoms many times don't show up right away. They show up later. They show up in neurological issues when you're our age. And so from our kids' standpoint, we need to be better. We need to know better. We need to know what to do in case this were to happen to our child. Medical world is going to take him or her right away. After that, most of the time, they're not returned to sport. in the appropriate amount of time. They're playing earlier, and they're definitely not not trained. They're getting back into school faster. So call it a return to play and a return to learn. And the brain needs to rest, and our kids don't know how to rest our brain. If we were to tell them you can't go to school and you can't play sports, if they're at home, what do you think the first thing they're going to do is? Turn on their game, turn on their phone, turn on their iPad, turn on the TV. That's all they know how to do. But really, true rest is none of it. True rest, true cognitive rest at least, is truly not looking at anything, not thinking. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to heal the brain how we need to. So kids take longer, not shorter, because their brain is going through all of those stages of development. A weak neck, a little neck, a neck in poor posture, those kids, those adults are going to be more of a target for any concussion, whether it's motor vehicle or sports injuries. Let me know if you have any questions. This is loaded. The takeaway: look at their posture, understand their risk, and make sure you are being evaluated by a chiropractor. Make sure their neck is not stuck so that their brain doesn't fire, and make sure you start to really, really work on how that system is all working together. Thanks, guys. Have a great Monday.